in exile or the diaspora is almost over. In just a couple days, actually tomorrow, it will be over because you'll be in Franklin, North Carolina, which is kind of like semi-exile, right?
It's all relative, Mike. Um, and as I heard once many years ago, it's all relative. Depends who you're related to.
That's true.
So
That's true. That's true. So you've had a good time in Colombia with mutual friends, Craig and Jan, of course.
yeah, it's what's the traveling is difficult.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
Oh
Living
yeah.
out of
Yeah.
state is not good. However, when you get to reconnect with the people on Earth that you care the most about, that makes these trips, all the more worthwhile.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
And that in itself is why you're coming to Franklin last.
Yeah, well, this is, and it's interesting because I just heard what the weather is in the Northeast.
Hmm.
It's really good that I wasn't planning to try to fly back to Israel, in a snowstorm. But anyway, let's get on with what's going on
Go
in
for it.
Israel. Um, right now, everything is about as clear as mud.
Yeah.
Um, by now, hopefully, all of our listeners know about our raid in Rafiah,
Hmm.
what the English language media calls Rafah, that rescued two hostages.
Yeah.
What made that especially sweet is that these two men were Argentinian Israelis,
Hmm.
and the president of Argentina was in the country at the time
Oh wow.
at the Western Wall.
Oh.
He's Argentina's new president is fanatically pro-Israel,
Hmm.
has studied Judaism over the years. Really fascinating man in and of itself, in and of himself. Now, what's interesting is I mentioned this the other night where I was speaking, and someone was very confused. Are they Israeli or are they Argentinian? So I said, they're Argentinian Israelis. Like I'm an American Israeli, meaning they were born in Argentina
Hmm.
and she could not wrap her brain around that.
Hmm.
We talk about Jews from around the world living in Israel, but for whatever reason, she couldn't. Okay,
Well,
so
it's only been in the last, how many years now? 70 years that the before that most Jews were born outside of Israel and made Aliyah. One of the gentlemen that I knew years ago was the first Jew to be born in the state of Israel in 1948.
really,
Again, thinking that the terminology here of Israel as a modern day state has only been around for just over 70 years.
yeah, and we're approaching our 76th anniversary,
Yeah,
but the majority of Israelis were born in Israel.
yeah.
That's what's
Now,
amazing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Israel is still we still consider ourselves a nation of immigrants, but
Hmm.
it's not really like that. In any case, we had incredible intelligence that enabled dozens of our troops, special commandos, to go into the middle of this, humongous cesspool of Rafiah
Yeah.
and liberate them. Um, and now all you hear in the media, the world media, as well as that in Israel, is this, hostage deal, pause, ceasefire.
Mhm.
I struggle with the idea of how do you have a pause in a war for a number of weeks and then go back to it? And then, of course, assuming that the terrorists are not rearming, repositioning, and preparing all kinds of ambushes.
Hmm.
It's a really bad situation. We're under enormous American governmental pressure. Um, we're living at a time where the world has gone insane.
Yeah. Agreed.
The Museum of Modern Art in New York City was taken over by demonstrators. A hospital, this It's ongoing and it's daily.
Mm.
Um, it's beyond shocking, beyond shocking. And this is when those who truly care for Israel have to pull together and get focused, and in many, many cases, stop being silent.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. The whole thing that's going on down on the Egyptian border, the tunnels, what is there if they do a pause? How do you do a pause when you still have over 100 hostages? I mean, that one thing in itself doesn't make any sense.
Well,
It's,
the reason for these proposed pauses is the release of
yeah,
hostages.
yeah, but
At the same time, we are expected to release terrorists.
yeah,
See, that's also the issue of terminology that makes me crazy. In the world media, it's described like as a prisoner exchange.
hmm,
We get the hostages and they get, those Arabs that are in Israeli prisons.
yeah,
They're in Israeli prisons because they either killed or tried to kill Jews.
yeah.
I mean, they're not political prisoners. It's very strange.
Yeah, and
Very
as you said a few
strange.
weeks ago, the death toll, the what I believe is a lie, the death toll in Gaza of Palestinians, there's not a single one of their soldiers that's been killed. They're all civilians,
Now,
of course. Yeah,
and again, the thing that gets me is having been in New York City on 9/11
yeah,
and afterwards. For weeks, there were posters put up by people seeking missing relatives.
hmm,
Were they in one of the towers? Did they make it out? Did they jump from the building? What happened? Weeks.
yeah,
But here in Gaza, a building is struck, and within 2 minutes, it's already announced
yeah,
37 children,
yeah,
14 women, and 35 men were killed. I
yeah,
mean, it's amazing.
yeah.
No one moved a stone from this, alleged
Mhm.
explosion. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and the
Unbelievable.
media the media grabs a hold of that. Of course, last night there was a death up in Safed or Sfat. So here we have now uh, an increase in the activity, or I guess this is going to increase it. Um, what, 8 wounded?
The situation with Hezbollah is just going from bad to worse, like within a minute.
Yeah,
The potential for a much larger, far more difficult war is right there. I
yeah,
mean, it's not even like, well, if A happens and B and then C,
hmm,
this isn't it's ongoing. And the war with Hezbollah, and it's either a war now or a war a year from now, down the road. I mean, there's no doubt there will be a war. There was a UN Security Council resolution 1701 in 2006 that required them to be behind the Litani River. So you've got a distance of somewhere, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, 25 to 30 miles
hmm,
between the Litani and the border.
hmm,
They've been on the border, but neither, and people say, rightfully so, well, the UN didn't enforce it, etc. But you know what? Israel didn't call them on it either.
yeah,
And
yeah. So
in
both
most
are
of the
complacent.
years, in most of the years since that time, the majority of the years, our prime minister was a guy by the name of Benjamin Netanyahu, and he did nothing.
Yeah,
It's interesting.
yeah.
I'm approaching the end of this speaking tour, already working on the presentations for next time, by the way. Um, and the only issue that people have taken with me is my criticism of Prime Minister Netanyahu. In their mind, he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. When I point out he's the one that did all these building freezes in Judea and Samaria, He's the one, he's the one indicted. He's the one for influence peddling. He's the one that destroyed our health system by appointing Haredi, ultra-Orthodox ministers in just a political switch. They did nothing, not because they're ultra-Orthodox, but because they're just not involved. So they were our health ministers. All of these things I point out, and they look at me and like, well, we still think he's a good guy. Well, good for you.
Well, I
So
mean,
like, make him prime minister of the Hebrew roots, world. I don't.
that could happen, by the way. There's yeah, I mean,
It
Bibi
wouldn't
Netanyahu.
happen because it wouldn't happen because he's a Jew.
Oh,
That's why
that's true. Yeah, well, that's another subject.
they wouldn't do that.
Yeah. They might make an exception for Bibi Netanyahu. The man used to, I believe the man used to be quite a statesman as far as his presence in a room.
Yeah,
I think he's lost a lot of that through the years. The other thing is he's been seen with a number of Christian leaders, such as John Hagee, the Kufi organization, and various ones. And
right.
I think they just kind of figured, well, if John Hagee thinks he's a good guy, then he must be. But whatever. I want to go back to Sfat. For those that have not been to Israel, to give a little bit more of a topography of this. If you're standing on the north shore of the Galilee, if you'd have been standing there yesterday, you would have been able to see this rocket strike. Spot is that close. It's right there on the north shore of the Galilee. So this is bringing now into play towns like Tiberias, uh, Nazareth, even, and various places there. So this that we're talking about more getting closer and closer into the land, or farther and farther into the land of Israel. So this is a different level now that they
Yeah,
have hit Sfat.
yeah.
It was
It's
one thing. Kiri, when I was on the North Shore just a couple of weeks ago, Hanok, of the Galilee, I went up to Capernaum, and I looked up and saw the Kiryat Shemona sign, and I thought, I got plenty of time. I could just run up there, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, that's in rocket attack range, and
yeah.
I can't hardly describe to you the feeling that came over me, um, just to know that I was that close to people that are fleeing their homes. I was in the hotel probably with people from Kiryat Shemona in various places.
Yeah. It's an extremely difficult situation. What astounds me is that I continually come across people at various locations who love Israel, are committed to Israel, but for whatever reason still do not read Israeli news sources.
Well, this is an issue, and one that I'm going to be talking to Barry with in just a few minutes when I get off here with you. I do believe that anybody that has TikTok on their phone or on their children's phones should delete that. I do not believe that any parent should allow their child to have TikTok on their phone, because if that is your news source, then basically what you're saying to me is you really don't care about the true news.
I let's see, I'm confused already with the days. Today's Wednesday.
Yeah.
So Monday evening, after I had spoken, someone came over to me and said, do you know that Israel, well, actually, the way he phrased it was that 2 hostages were freed. Did I know?
Hmm.
It had happened, it had happened a day before. So I said, not only, yes, I know, but they weren't freed. They were freed, but by Israel. They
Yeah.
were rescued. Okay. Then he said to me, how come I'm not hearing that on the news? And I said, and what news are you expecting to hear it from? And it was a really awkward moment. I had a similar situation. Um, a few weeks ago when someone said this was on Shabbat, he said to me, he said, "So, what's the latest from Israel? What's going on?"
Hmm.
So I said, "You mean since Shabbat started? I mean, I haven't been on my phone since Shabbat started." He said, "No, in general." I said, "In general, since when? Which of our news sources are you looking at?" He said, "Well, I'm not looking at any."
Hmm. Well, let's
Okay.
face it. This past weekend, in specifically in the United States,
Yeah.
the whole thing was about the Super Bowl, which I think I ran through it there for like 15 seconds. I just don't care anything about it. But as someone who does keep up with the American news, it is tragic that Israel is not being covered at all, really. In the Fox is not covering Israel. I don't remember the last time I really saw much of anything. And what's coming out on the mainline media is, you guys are being thrown under the bus.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, what the buzzwords that people have is somehow Israel is committing some kind of genocide
Yeah,
in Gaza, but they call it Palestine,
yeah.
and we're killing a gazillion number of Palestinians. And the attention span that people have is about an eighth of a second, and that's lodged in their head.
Hmm.
We can't change them, the outside world, but what we're trying to do is change people within communities that are at least among like-minded people loving Israel.
Hmm. And
When
I
when,
found,
when people when
go ahead.
people don't know something, I can work with it.
Hmm.
When they don't really want to know something,
Yeah.
like when people will say, "I heard that this was an inside job, that someone in Israel made the decision to quote unquote stand
Hmm.
down." And all the restraint that I have holds me back. And I try to explain we did an enormous amount of things wrong.
Hmm.
We had incredibly horrific intelligence failures. But the idea, and again, I have nothing but disdain and disgust for Netanyahu.
Hmm.
But even Netanyahu would never have allowed this horrific massacre to occur, assuming he knew about it. But here's the kicker. The reason they say that it was an inside job is Israel wanted an excuse to go and quote, ethnically cleanse Gaza to set up all these Jewish communities.
Yeah.
And when I looked them in the face and I said, read my lips, Israel is not reestablishing, creating, or any other word you want to use, any Jewish communities in Gaza. Now, I'm not saying that's not what I want to
Yeah.
happen, but the whole premise behind this, like when someone came over to me and said that they had a relative who was very into this Khazar theory, that the Jews of
Oh, yeah.
today are not the Jews of Bible in the Israel and the land of Israel, but are descendants of the Khazar kingdom,
Hmm.
where a number of Jews converted in their leadership because they were stuck between the Muslims and the Byzantines. But I said to him, I said, besides sending you all these DNA testing things, let me give you a bottom line. So Jewish people from around the world have been regathered in Israel. The state of Israel has gone from sand, dust, and rocks to this amazing country. And I'm going on and on and on. And then I paused and I said, so you mean to tell me that the God that we serve made a mistake and brought the wrong people to the land of Israel for reestablishment of the state? And he looked at me and he said, slam dunk. There's nothing to say after that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's about as well put as I've ever heard it, Hanok. I hate to say that, but you got it right. You know, you consider that 6 million people were killed, and all they had to do was look at Hitler and go, "We're just kidding. We're not Jews." It's just the whole thing just doesn't make any sense. Well, it does when you think spiritually, everything makes sense. When you try to handle Israel on a physical realm, on a physical plane, nothing makes sense.
No,
Yeah, I mean the establishment of Israel, the agriculture, the technology of nothing makes sense in that land. You have to look at Israel in a spiritual sense.
yeah,
That's just all there is to it. So,
absolutely.
for these people that want to do the, Barry and I are actually talking about a little bit today. Our plan is actually, we don't have a clue really when we get into it, but our plan is Israel cannot be a fad. As I look in the scripture, Hanok, from the beginning, when you go back to Genesis, Bereshit chapter 12, um, Hashem, the Almighty, has never made Israel a fad.
No,
In fact,
consistent, consistent.
yeah, the verse that I've used so many times, that you and I have talked about, the only place that he says, and I taught on this last Shabbat at Life Assembly, the only place he says in all of Scripture, the only time that he says, I will do something with my whole heart and being, is bringing Israel back into the land.
Yeah,
And to say that whoops, I got the wrong people.
yeah.
Um,
I
I
mean,
mean,
it's so
that's just,
obvious.
that's bizarre to me.
But the thing is, it's all rooted in hatred, disgust, and disdain of the Jewish people.
That's true.
That's what it all it's a replacement theology,
Yeah.
it's a supersessionism,
Yeah.
and it's a true hatred.
Well, Hanok, let's face it, if you guys were as easy to get along with as we are, it'd be, a lot different.
But again, you have these people say Jews are taking over the world. There's
Yeah.
so many of them, they're so influential.
Yeah.
Okay, the world is 8 billion people.
Yeah.
Jewish population of the world is 15 million. That's 0.02, not 2%, but 0.02% Jews in the world. But when they ask these, mental midgets roaming the streets, how many Jews are there? You get in the world, you get numbers ranging from 500 million to 1.5 billion, billion and a
Wow.
half Jews.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
I could say, where they at? It's unbelievable.
we live in a society of somewhere ranging on the scale between ignorance and stupidity. No doubt about that.
Yeah.
No doubt. So, um, yeah, there's so much, and I really, we have limited space here, so we're not making a big push with you here this weekend. We're going to have standing room only, I believe. But are you planning? Let me give you a couple things. Are you planning to has I have not seen it online, so excuse me if it's there, but have you recorded this and will it be on YouTube at some later date?
It was recorded for me. And my initial plan was not to post it, but I've changed my mind. I will be
Okay.
posting it. The problem, and live stream in many cases has become a curse.
Yeah, it has. It
It's
has.
great for people that are remote,
Yeah.
but as we experienced a few years ago when we both spoke
Hmm.
together in Northern Alabama,
Hmm.
they live streamed the event and people simply didn't come. So
Yeah.
we don't get to meet people, we don't get to connect, we don't get to form a
Hmm.
relationship. And God forbid, someone should contribute to an
Yeah.
offering online. Doesn't happen. Okay,
Yeah.
it happens but rarely.
Yeah.
Um,
I know.
so
I
yeah, I
mean,
will
it's
be.
great, as you said,
I
it's
will
great
be.
for those that are remote. But when somebody is one block down the road and decides to sit in their jammies and watch the TV, that's another issue. Yeah.
I can't tell you how many pastors have shared with me their frustration because they are convinced,
Hmm.
because people do say, I like your teaching that you did this past Shabbat, but they are sitting in their jammies with a cup of
Hmm.
coffee in one hand, raisin bran in the other, and they're just, but they're also not part of the community anymore.
Yeah, they're disconnected.
They've separated themselves.
That is the curse of the one of the greatest inventions was the cell phone, the iPhone. Steve
Yeah,
Jobs, one of the greatest curses, has been the same thing, because it has made a people that can now connect on any level to people who connect really on no level.
yeah.
So
It's it's crazy.
yeah, so this will be available when you get back, or what? When you
At some point in the future, in
Okay.
the next few weeks, I think.
Okay, so we'll make sure that that is put out. Hanok is at the end of his tour. He's coming here to Franklin, and we're going to try to not abuse him too much. There are some slight plans, but we're going. We got to take care of Uncle Hanok. Um, and
Sounds good. I'm
yeah,
not worried. Not
but
worried
for
at all.
those of you who have, you're listening, you're watching, this is, I know, an expensive tour for you. And so if people would go to coleyehuda.com, and donate, it would be great. I'm sure you could use those funds. We want you to be able to get back home.
Thank you. I deeply appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No need to go into more details about that, but yeah.
All right. Well, Bezrat Hashem, I will not have jury duty tomorrow, and so I will be coming to see you.
That's
If
great.
not, you'll have some very entertaining transportation, I'm sure.
Sure. Something will work out. Not to
Okay.
worry.
All right.
Thanks,
Take care.
Mike.
See you tomorrow.
See you, man. Bye-bye.